Laura had always been the kind of woman who kept everything under control. Her house was spotless, her schedule precise, her emotions carefully hidden behind a calm smile. To everyone around her, she seemed content. A woman in her late 30s, married to a successful architect, living in a quiet suburb just outside of Portland. But inside, things were not as they looked. Her marriage to Ethan had become a series of polite conversations and predictable routines. The warmth they once shared had slowly been replaced by silence that filled the spaces between them. Ethan was kind, dependable, and good-hearted. But lately, he'd become distant. He often came home late, too tired to talk, and too distracted to notice the small things Laura still did for him. Fresh flowers on the table, his favorite dinner, or the way she'd linger near the window just to hear his car pull into the driveway. The love was still there, but it was buried under years of exhaustion, unspoken resentment, and quiet disappointment. Then came Maya. Maya had been Laura's best friend since college. Bold, fearless, always the center of attention wherever she went. She was everything Laura used to be before she became cautious, before she started choosing comfort over risk. Maya lived in Seattle and worked as an event planner. Whenever she visited, the energy in Laura's home changed. She filled the rooms with laughter, stories, and an easy confidence that drew people in, including Ethan. At first, Laura didn't mind the way Ethan and Maya got along. It was natural they shared a sense of humor, and she liked that Ethan could relax around her friend. But recently, something had started to feel different. Laura noticed how Ethan seemed to look forward to Maya's visits, how his eyes lit up when she entered the room, or how he laughed a little too freely when she spoke. Maya, too, had begun to show a gentler side when Ethan was around, less playful, more thoughtful. Laura told herself she was imagining it, that it was just her own insecurity. But one evening, while cleaning up after dinner, she caught a moment, a fleeting glance between the two, that made her chest tighten. It wasn't inappropriate, but it was real. Something unspoken was there, something delicate and dangerous that night. Laura lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning. She didn't want to accuse anyone. She didn't even know what she wanted to prove. She only knew that she felt invisible, like she had been watching her own life from the outside. The next morning, as she sipped her coffee, an idea took root in her mind. It was irrational, maybe even foolish, but she couldn't shake it. She would invite them both, Ethan and Maya, for dinner. The three of them together under one roof. She told herself it was just to clear the air, to remind herself that there was nothing to worry about. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She wanted to test her limits to see what her heart would do when faced with the truth. So she sent the text. "Dinner at our place this Friday. Just the three of us. It's been too long," Maya replied. First, an enthusiastic "I'm in. Can't wait," followed by a heart emoji. Ethan texted from work an hour later. "Sounds nice. Need me to bring anything?" Laura typed back, "Just yourself." Friday arrived faster than she expected. She spent the afternoon cooking roasted salmon, creamy potatoes, and a lemon pie that used to be Ethan's favorite. The house looked perfect, warm lights glowing softly against the evening sky. But inside, her stomach twisted with nerves. When Ethan came home, he looked surprised to see the effort she'd put in. "What's the occasion?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Nothing," Laura said lightly. "Just wanted a nice evening with the people I care about." He smiled, unaware of the storm building inside her. When Maya arrived, she swept in with her usual energy, bright red lipstick, laughter that seemed to fill the whole room. She hugged Laura tightly, complimented the house, then turned to Ethan with a grin. "Wow, still as handsome as ever, Ethan. You two never age." Laura forced a laugh. It was meant as a joke, but something about the easy familiarity in Maya's tone made her chest ache. Dinner began pleasantly enough. They talked about old college memories, vacations, and the small absurdities of everyday life. The conversation flowed effortlessly, but Laura couldn't stop noticing the small things, how Ethan leaned in when Maya spoke, how Maya brushed her hair back in that effortless way that always drew attention at one point. Maya told a story about an old college professor who once confused her and Laura's essays because they were both too perfect. They all laughed, but Laura's laughter faded when she noticed Ethan's gaze lingered on Maya just a moment too long. Maya caught it too. Laura could tell by the brief flicker of discomfort that crossed her friend's eyes. But then she smiled again, covering it up, as if nothing had happened. When they moved to the living room after dinner, the air felt heavier. Maya sat on the couch next to Ethan while Laura brought in coffee. She paused for just a second in the doorway, long enough to see Ethan laughing at something Maya whispered. The sight hit her like a small, quiet wave, not of anger, but of realization. She wasn't just testing them. She was testing herself as the night went on. The conversation turned more serious. Maya began talking about relationships, how people change, how sometimes love fades, but connection remains. Her tone was thoughtful, her gaze far away. "Do you think love can come back once it's gone?" she asked softly, almost to herself. Laura looked at her, then at Ethan. "Maybe," she said, "but it depends on whether both people still want it." The silence that followed was long, filled with things none of them said. When Maya finally stood to leave, she hugged Ethan first. Then Laura, her embrace lingered a little longer than usual, her voice low. "You're lucky, Laura. You have something most people only dream of." Laura smiled faintly, though her heart ached. "Do I?" Maya didn't answer. She just smiled again, that quiet, knowing smile, and walked out into the night. Ethan closed the door behind her. Turning back to Laura with a confused expression. "What was that about?" Laura shook her head. "I don't know." He reached out to touch her shoulder, but she stepped back, her voice calm. "It's late. Let's just go to bed." When he went upstairs, Laura stayed behind. She stood by the window, watching the taillights of Maya's car fade into the darkness. The room was silent now, but her thoughts were loud, replaying every look, every word, every laugh from the night. She had wanted to prove something to herself, but all she had done was open a door she didn't know how to close. She realized the danger wasn't in what Ethan or Maya might feel. It was in the emotions she had uncovered within herself, the jealousy, the longing, the quiet sense of being forgotten. For years, she had lived safely, predictably, avoiding the edges of her own feelings. But tonight, for the first time, she had stood on that edge, and it terrified her how easy it was to fall. As the clock ticked past midnight, she whispered to herself, "I just wanted to see what I could handle." But deep down, she already knew this was only the beginning. The days after that dinner passed slowly, but the silence in Laura's home felt louder than ever. Ethan went about his usual routine work, late nights at the office, quiet dinners where conversation barely stretched beyond "how was your day?" He didn't mention Maya, and neither did Laura still. The air between them felt tense, like they were both avoiding a topic too fragile to touch. Laura tried to convince herself that she was overthinking everything, that dinner had been harmless, that she was just tired and emotional. But her thoughts betrayed her. Every time her phone buzzed, she half expected it to be Maya. Every time Ethan smiled at something on his screen, she wondered who he was texting. She hated the feeling. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was uncertainty, the kind that ate away at trust in small, invisible ways. On Wednesday afternoon, as she was folding laundry, her phone rang. Maya's name flashed on the screen. Laura hesitated before answering. "Hey, stranger," Maya said, her voice bright as ever. "You disappeared after Friday. Everything okay?" Laura forced a laugh. "Yeah, just busy. That dinner was nice, though. We should do it again sometime." There was a pause on the line. "Yeah," Maya said softly. "It was. Different." Laura felt her throat tighten. "Different how?" "Just seeing you two together. You've built something steady, you know? It made me think. About what? About how people grow apart without meaning to." For a second, neither spoke. Then Maya changed the subject, asking about work and random things. But even after they hung up, the weight of her words stayed. That night, Laura couldn't focus on anything. She watched Ethan work at his desk, his face lit by the glow of his laptop. She wanted to ask him how he felt about Maya's visit, but every time she tried, her courage faded. Finally, she said, "You seem to enjoy having her around." He looked up, surprised. "Of course. She's your friend. It was fun." Laura studied his face. "Just fun." He frowned, closing the laptop. "What's this about, Laura?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing. Forget it." He sighed, clearly tired. "If you're worried about something, just say it." But she couldn't, because how do you explain a feeling that doesn't have proof? How do you tell someone that their laughter with someone else made you feel invisible? Instead, she smiled tightly. "It's fine." "Really?" But it WASN single quotes, though, the next day, as Laura was grocery shopping. She ran into Maya. She looked effortlessly radiant, even in casual clothes. They hugged, and Maya said she'd just finished meeting a client nearby. "I was going to call you," Maya said. "Actually, can we grab coffee? I need to talk." Something in her tone made Laura uneasy, but she agreed. They went to a small cafe down the street. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, and sunlight spilled through the windows. Maya stirred her coffee slowly, her gaze thoughtful. "Laura, I don't want this to sound wrong, but have you been happy lately?" Laura froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean with Ethan, with your life." Laura gave a small laugh. "That's a big question." "I know," Maya said, smiling faintly. "It's just, when I saw you two together, it felt like you were there, but not really there. Like you've built this beautiful home, but forgot to live in it." The words stung more than Laura expected. She wanted to defend herself, to say her marriage was fine, but deep down, she knew there was truth in what Maya said. "I guess things have changed," Laura admitted quietly. "We've both been so busy just trying to keep things going." Maya nodded, her expression gentle. "That's normal. But don't lose yourself in it. You used to be so full of life. I miss that version of you." Laura looked down at her coffee, emotions swirling inside her. It felt strange hearing that from Maya, the woman who had always seemed so free. They talked for nearly 2 hours, laughing about old times, sharing thoughts they hadn't voiced in years. For the first time in a long while, Laura felt seen. Maya's warmth was easy to fall into. It reminded her of a part of herself she'd forgotten. As they walked to their cars afterward, Maya squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you think, Laura. Don't let comfort become a cage." The words echoed long after Maya drove away. That evening, Ethan noticed something different in Laura. She was quieter, thoughtful. When he asked what was wrong, she only said, "I met Maya today." He paused. "Oh, how's she doing?" "She's fine," Laura replied. "She thinks we've changed." Ethan chuckled. "Well, people do. That's life." His casual response irritated her. "Do you ever think about how different things used to be?" she asked. He looked confused. "What's going on with you, Laura?" She shook her head, trying to hold back frustration. "Nothing. Sometimes I miss how we used to talk. How we used to laugh." Ethan softened. "We still can, you know. You just need to let me in again." The words were kind, but they felt incomplete, because she didn't know if she could let him in. At least not until she understood what she was feeling that night. She found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone, vacations, anniversaries, parties with friends. Her younger self smiled back at her, carefree and bright-eyed. Somewhere along the way, that light had dimmed. She didn't realize she'd been crying until she heard Ethan's footsteps behind her. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Laura quickly wiped her face. "Yeah, just looking at old pictures." He sat beside her, glancing at the screen. "We used to take so many of those." "Yeah," she whispered. "We did." He smiled a little sadly. "We could do that again. Start over." For a brief second, hope flickered inside her. Maybe they could fix things. Maybe it wasn't too late, but then her phone buzzed a message from Maya. "Thinking of you tonight. You deserve to feel alive again." Laura's breath caught. It wasn't flirtatious. Not exactly. But it carried something deeper, something emotional, something that stirred what she'd tried to bury. She didn't reply. But she also didn't delete it. The following weekend, Ethan had to leave for a 2-day work conference. Laura told herself it would be good some space to think, to clear her head. But the silence of the house was unbearable. That evening, as rain pattered against the windows, her phone rang. Maya again. "Hey, I'm in town for a client meeting tomorrow," she said. "Thought I'd check on you." Laura hesitated. "Ethan's away." "I know," Maya said gently. "Then you shouldn't be alone. How about dinner?" Laura knew she should say no, that it would only complicate things. But something in Maya's voice, warm, understanding, broke through her hesitation. "Okay," she said softly. "Dinner sounds nice." When she hung up, her reflection stared back at her in the window, uncertain, restless. She didn't know what she was walking into. Only that she was drawn to something she didn't fully understand. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts raced between guilt and curiosity, between what was right and what felt real. She didn't want to betray Ethan. She just wanted to feel something again. By morning, she convinced herself it was harmless, a simple dinner between friends. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about friendship anymore. It was about truth. As she got ready, choosing a dress she hadn't worn in years, she caught her own reflection and whispered, "Just dinner." But even she didn't believe it. When Maya arrived that evening, she looked effortlessly elegant, her smile warm and knowing. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like new beginnings and danger mixed together. Laura opened the door, heart pounding. "You came." Maya smiled softly. "Of course. I told you you shouldn't be alone tonight." And in that quiet moment, standing face to face, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding that whatever happened next would change everything. But Laura didn't step back. She only whispered, "Come in." And as the door closed behind them, she knew this wasn't about testing limits anymore. It was about discovering them. Laura stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of what she was doing. Maya stepped inside, carrying a calm confidence that always seemed to fill any room she entered. She hung her coat by the door and smiled. That familiar, gentle smile that could disarm anyone. "You look beautiful," Maya said softly. Laura felt a rush of warmth, quickly brushing it away. "It's just an old dress," she replied, forcing a laugh. They settled in the living room. The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind a quiet hum of dripping water from the trees. Laura poured tea, though her hands trembled slightly. Maya noticed, but said nothing. Instead, she sat close, her eyes studying Laura as though she could see the storm behind her calm face. For a while, they spoke about small things, work, travel, memories from years ago. But underneath every word was tension neither of them dared to name. It wasn't romantic tension in the usual sense, it was emotional, raw, filled with years of things left unsaid. After a pause, Maya spoke. "Do you ever feel like you became someone you never planned to be?" Laura looked down at her cup. "Every day." Maya nodded slowly. "I used to look at you and think you had everything figured out. The house, the marriage, the calm life. But now I see the cracks. And it makes you human again." Laura smiled faintly, sadness in her eyes. "You always saw more than most people did." Maya's tone softened. "Maybe that's why I came back. I missed that version of Usta, one that used to talk about dreams instead of bills." Laura felt her throat tighten. She hadn't realized until that moment how lonely she had been. Maya's words touched something fragile inside Hertha, part that had long stopped believing in magic or possibility. "Maya," Laura began, her voice trembling, "why are you really here?" Maya looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because you matter to me. And because I think you're living behind walls you didn't build alone." The honesty in her tone pierced through Laura's defenses. For a second she wanted to cry, to admit everything, to say she was scared, tired, and unsure of who she was anymore. But she couldn't. Years of composure wouldn't let her. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know what to do anymore." Maya reached over, touching her hand gently. Start by being honest with yourself. The touch was simple, comforting, and yet it sent a wave of emotion through Laura. She didn't pull away. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, her eyes glistening. Then Maya stood, walking toward the window. "You don't have to keep pretending everything's perfect," she said softly. "You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to feel lost." Laura looked at her friend's reflection in the glass, her own heart heavy with unspoken words. What if wanting more ruins everything? Then maybe everything wasn't as solid as you thought. Maya replied quietly. The words hit Laura hard. She looked around the room, the polished furniture, the framed photos, the well-arranged flowers, all symbols of a life she had worked so hard to maintain. But for the first time, she wondered if it had all been built for appearance rather than peace. When Maya turned back, Laura's face had softened. "I'm scared," she admitted. Maya walked closer. "Everyone is. But you don't have to face it alone." For a moment, their eyes met, filled with years of shared history, affection, and understanding. Laura realized that what she felt wasn't attraction. It was connection. A deep reminder of what real care felt like. She stepped back slightly and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me who I was." Kami smiled, her voice calm. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that makes them comfortable." They stood in silence, two women confronting their truths. Then, without another word, Maya said she should leave. Laura walked her to the door. Before stepping out, Maya turned and said softly, "Whatever happens next, promise me you'll start living for yourself." Laura nodded, her eyes damp. "I will." When the door closed, the silence of the house returned, but it felt different this time. Not heavy, not lonely, just still. Laura stood for a long moment, thinking about everything Maya had said. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sound of rain starting again outside. For the first time in years, she didn't feel numb. She felt everything's fear, hope, confusion, freedom. It was overwhelming, but real. The next morning, she made herself a strong cup of coffee and sat by the window. The city outside looked washed clean after the rain. She thought about Ethan, about the years they'd spent building their life. There had been love, laughter, sacrifices. But somewhere along the way, they had stopped seeing each other. She knew she couldn't blame him entirely. They both had let distance settle between them. When Ethan came home that evening, Laura greeted him with a quiet smile. He looked tired, but he smiled back. "Missed me?" He teased gently. "Yeah," she said softly. "I did." They sat down for dinner, and for the first time in a long time, she asked him about his day and really listened. He seemed surprised, then relieved. Slowly, conversation flowed. They laughed a little awkward at first, but genuine. After dinner, Laura took a deep breath. "Ethan," she began, "I think we've both been pretending that everything's fine when it isn't, and I don't want to do that anymore." Ethan's expression grew serious. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to be honest. With each other. I've been unhappy. Lost, maybe. But I want to find my way back. Not just to you two, myself." He looked down, processing her words. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said gently. "We both stopped trying. We forgot how to talk, how to care in the little ways. I don't want to give up. But I also don't want to keep pretending." For a long time, Ethan said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "I know. I've felt it too. I just didn't know how to fix it." "Maybe we don't fix it overnight," Laura said softly. "Maybe we start small." He smiled faintly. "I'd like that." That night they sat together on the couch, not saying much. The silence between them felt softer now, like the beginning of something rather than the end, later. When Ethan had gone to bed, Laura stood by the window again, looking at the rain. She thought about Maya, her words, her strength, her honesty. There was no resentment, no confusion, only gratitude. Maya had not come to break her world apart. She had come to wake her up. Laura sent her a message, "Thank you for reminding me to feel again." Maya replied almost instantly, "Always." Don't lose that spark. Laura smiled and set her phone down. For the first time in years, she felt peace, not because everything was perfect, but because she was finally being truthful with herself in the weeks that followed. Laura and Ethan started making small changes. They cooked together, went for walks, talked about things they'd long ignored. Some days were awkward. Others were beautiful. Healing wasn't easy. But it was real, and though Maya remained a quiet presence in her life, sometimes through short texts, sometimes through memories, Laura knew her journey had shifted. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Not because of betrayal, but because of awakening. One evening, as she watched the sunset from her porch, Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "For the first time in a long time. I really am." He kissed her forehead gently, and together they watched the sky turn from gold to violet. Laura knew there were still things to face, truths to speak, feelings to mend, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She understood now that love wasn't about perfection or safety. It was about honesty, about showing up even when things felt uncertain. And in that quiet moment, she felt gratitude for the rain, for the silence, and for the friend who had reminded her that sometimes the most important love story is the one you have with yourself.